If you just tribute channel fans are interested, I spent 7 years of my life founding and running Rolling Stones records for the Rolling Stones. But I also was involved in the Rolling Stones early recordings at Chess Records, where they actually started writing the song Satisfaction and later finished it. Check out this lecture about the Rolling Stones at Chess Records, but also about Exile on Main Street. So it ties in my career completely, how I met the Rolling Stones and working with them at Rolling Stones Records. Check out this lecture. You're going to find it interesting.
I want to make a case briefly before we get into the photography about the role Los Angeles plays in the history of the Rolling Stones.
All right.
There's a very special, extraordinary connection between our beloved City of Angels and this band. I like to say that every generation falls in love with itself. And the best signifier of that is the music we listen to. And if you happen to have been blessed and fortunate enough to have been born in Los Angeles, as I was, on Sunset Boulevard, no less, just about a mile or two east of here, marinating in that extraordinary 60s era and coming of age with all of it was transformative and remarkable. And of course, we get a lot of stick from a lot of people, the boomer situation, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's driven by envy more than anything, because the quality of the music, the artistry, all of it has persevered and sustained itself, and which is why we're here today. A lot of people ask me on the books I do with my brother, what kind of research do you do? How do you go about that? And for me, it's the simplest thing. All I have to do is literally close my eyes and just conjure my own personal history. To have been born in this part of the city, no less, and to have immediate access to the Sunset Strip and Hollywood Boulevard and Laurel Canyon as your background to growing up and being a kid. It was really an extraordinary environment, and it really created in your mind a sense of wonder, and then suddenly there's this explosion of music that comes. Now, most of us can look to the Beatles on Ed Sullivan as this kind of transformative, iconic moment where everything is the Wizard of Oz moment, where we went from black and white to the Emerald City. But I would argue, at least for me and my cohort, and I hope I'm speaking for Neil in this regard, as extraordinary as the Beatles were and how amazing it was to see them on TV that night in February of '64, 4 months later, on June, I wrote some dates down because I want to get it right, but I think I remember offhand. It was around June 3rd or June 4th. England's newest hitmakers, the Rolling Stones, came to the States for the first time. And surprisingly, although they arrived in New York City in the wake of the Beatles and the whole British invasion, their first concert in America was not in New York City. On the contrary, they came to New York, gave a press conference, and then immediately got on a plane and flew to Los Angeles. And their very first concert in North America was in, of all places, San Bernardino at this legendary Swing Auditorium. And it is really quite extraordinary to think that that's where the Rolling Stones made their US debut. What's also interesting about that show, there were many groups on the bill that night, and one of the bands was Bobby Vee. And why is that interesting? Because the sax player in the band was a very young fellow getting his first tour as well, and his name was Bobby Keys. And so there, for your Stones fans, you know exactly what role he will play in the Stones saga going forward. But getting back to the Stones in LA, while they were in town, they made their debut on what was called the Hollywood Palace television show. And it was hosted by Dean Martin, and of course he was very dismissive, and he did his drunk act and all that. It was very dismissive of the Stones. But they came on and they sang 2 songs, Not Fade Away and I Just Want to Make Love to You. And I can tell you, as a precocious, perhaps 9-year-old Jewish middle-class boy growing up in the Fairfax district, watching these guys sing "I Just Want to Make Love to You" with this blonde-thatched Brian Jones on harmonica, sounding like Little Walter, who I didn't know, but I would learn, was mind-blowing, because we had just heard the Beatles singing "I Want to Hold Your Hand." Okay, paradigm shift, everybody. This is not quite what's going on here. Suddenly, everything shifted. I was trying to think of a literary analogy, and I think of the Beatles, and they were so cuddly and warm, and everybody, your parents could enjoy them. They were in their little uniforms, and I think of them as like A. Milne and Winnie the Pooh, and it was all very warm and fuzzy, and they sang "A Taste of Honey," which makes sense. And the Stones were like Anthony Burgess and Clockwork Orange, like boom, okay, all right, the world has shifted now. And from that moment on, I changed my allegiance from the Beatles to the Stones, and it was quite an education, because suddenly I stopped paying attention to baseball cards and discovered, well, who's Willie Dixon? Who is Muddy Waters? Who's Howlin' Wolf? What is Chester Burnett? What is this? All of these great blues artists that you learned about when you turned the record over. So the Stones immediately had this impact. This whole blues thing connects deeply as well, because right after they played in LA, they went on tour working their way back east, and they stopped in Chicago, and they did their first ever sessions at, of course, the legendary Chess Studios in Chicago, 2120 South Michigan Avenue, which we all know from the Stones album. Well, that's another address I knew before my own. I knew the address to Chess Studios, even though, what's that all about?